Good morning. We're reading Animal Farm by George Orwell. This is chapter 6. All that year, the animals worked like slaves. But they were happy in their work. They grudged no effort or sacrifice, well aware that everything that they did was for the benefit of themselves and those of their kind who had come after them, and not for a pack of idle, thieving human beings. Boy, that makes me think about what Americans think they're doing, how they're not giving it to the king.
Right.
And they're working for themselves and their progeny,
That's right.
to paraphrase the preamble. It also made me think about people being released from debt slavery or plantation slavery and still having to work in industrial spaces for whom, and they think it's for themselves and their retirement and whatnot, and here they are in what's supposed to be the socialist situation and what's happening. But at least it's not for human beings, right? So they're not working for the capitalists. Throughout the spring and summer, they worked a 60-hour week. And in August, Napoleon announced that there would be work on Sunday afternoons as well. This work was strictly voluntary, but any animal who absented himself from it would have his rations reduced by half. Even so, it was found necessary to leave certain tasks undone. The harvest was a little less successful than in the previous year, and 2 fields which should have been sown with roots in the early summer were not sown because the plowing had not been completed early enough. It was possible to foresee that the coming winter would be a hard one. So why is all the work not getting done? The windmill, right?
Right.
So they're putting so much work into the windmill that the regular stuff isn't getting done, even though last year was successful.
That's right. They're putting all their effort in, not all, but a significant portion into quote-unquote progress.
And who's that going to benefit? The windmill. Who does it seem like it's going to benefit from now? Not from what we know or project so much, but I mean, they're working because they think it's going to benefit themselves.
That's right.
But who gets all the extra goodies already?
The pigs.
And the dogs.
And the dogs.
Because if you don't pay the dogs or take care of the dogs will not protect the pigs. And the pigs have power because brains, trotters, dogs. So far. The windmill presented unexpected difficulties. There was a good quarry of limestone on the farm, and plenty of sand and cement had been found in one of the outhouses, so that all the materials for building were at hand. But the problem the animals could not at first solve was how to break up the stone into pieces of suitable size. There seemed no way of doing this except with picks and crowbars, which no animal could use because no animal could stand on his hind legs. Couldn't or was told not to. Only after but why would they do that? See, why would they prevent them from doing the very things that they would need to do to succeed that way? Not sure yet. I have a theory, but I'm not 100% yet. Only after weeks of vain effort did the right idea occur to somebody, namely to utilize the force of gravity. Huge boulders, far too big to be used as they were lying all over the bed of their quarry. The animals lashed ropes around these, and then all together, cows, horses, sheep, any animal that could lay hold of the rope, even the pigs sometimes joined in at critical moments, they dragged them with a desperate slowness up the slope to the top of the quarry. Echoes of Sisyphus.
Right.
Yes. Where again, he was prevented from succeeding. So I don't know if that was an intentional one or not, but
Right.
where they were toppled over the edge to shatter to pieces below. Transporting the stone when it was once broken was comparatively simple. The horses carried it off in cartloads. The sheep dragged single blocks. Even Muriel and Benjamin yoked themselves into an old governess cart and did their share. By late summer, a sufficient store of stone had accumulated, and then the building began under the superintendence of the pigs. It's always the pigs. Interesting. But it was a slow, laborious process. Frequently, it took a whole day of exhausting effort to drag a single boulder to the top of the quarry, and sometimes when it was pushed over the edge, it failed to break. Nothing could have been achieved without Boxer, whose strength seemed equal to that of all the rest of the animals put together. When the boulder began to slip and the animals cried out in despair at finding themselves dragged down the hill, it was always Boxer who strained himself against the rope and brought the boulder to a stop. To see him toiling up the slope inch by inch, his breath coming fast, the tips of his hooves clawing at the ground, and his great sides matted with sweat, filled everyone with admiration. The war hero. The war hero. There's something about that, and then them not being respected by the authoritarian leader.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't predict a great ending to Boxer, but he's kind of dumb, so that might save him. Clover warned him sometimes to be careful not to overstrain himself, but Boxer would never listen to her. His two slogans, "I will work harder" and "Napoleon is always right," seemed to him a sufficient answer to all problems. He had made arrangements with the cockerel to call him 3/4 of an hour earlier in the mornings instead of half an hour, and in his spare moments, of which there were not many nowadays, he would go alone to the quarry, collect a load of broken stone, and drag it down to the site of the windmill unassisted. The animals were not badly off throughout the summer, in spite of the hardness of their work. If they had no more food than they had had in Jones's day, at least the advantage of only having to feed themselves and not having to support 5 extravagant human beings as well was so great that it would have taken a lot of failures to outweigh it. So they're working twice as hard. They're eating maybe the same amount. They have less free time. The pigs are benefiting, but it's okay because humans. And in many ways, the animal method of doing things was more efficient and saved labor. Such jobs as weeding, for instance, could be done with a thoroughness impossible to human beings. And again, since no animal now stole, it was unnecessary to fence off pasture from arable land, which saved a lot of labor in the upkeep of hedges and gates. Nevertheless, as the summer wore on, various unforeseen shortages began to make themselves felt. There was need of paraffin oil, nails, string, dog biscuits. Really? And iron for the horses' shoes, none of which could be produced on the farm. That's super important right there. Let me get back to that at the end of the paragraph. Later, there would also be needs for seed and artificial manures, besides various tools, and finally the machinery for the windmill. How these were to be procured, no one was able to imagine. That's the problem with one nation being socialist and then being unwilling to, what do you do then? So whatever you can't get yourself within your group that you can barter, or whatever you want to call a social, in this situation, it's sort of a barter, or from each according to his needs, and to each, no, you know what I mean. To each according to his needs, from each according to his abilities. But that doesn't go. You can't just do that with the outside world. So what do you do? And thus you look at China and you'll see one solution. Everybody's sort of a capitalist in a way on the world stage for now. I think that it's, again, remember when we talked about the problem of volume, the problem of the more people there are, the less any system, any utopic type system works, any all-inclusive system type works, even to the point where the surveillance system is going to be hard to do all in all in China because of how big they are.
Mm-hmm.
They can't surveil and enforce everybody unless they convince them to surveil and enforce themselves, like here with commercialism. There's consumerism, commercialism.
Right.
There's something to that. And so
there's a lot of that in China now.
Well, and of course, you know how they're doing it? I was thinking about that. They have that credit system.
That's right.
So but then so do we. We have our own credit system. So they're not capitalists. They had to come up with a different credit system.
That's right. A social credit system.
So they weigh you, they judge you. If you're not doing what they want enough, they try to take things away from you, whether it's your liberty or something else, or your skin, or whatever they want to do. That's never been different, though. I don't care what your system is.
Right?
That is what, I mean, we want governments to make our lives better, but then it seems to cycle, because then the government takes it upon themselves to restrict this group to make that group's life better. Or something. That's their excuse, I think, at least. Anyway, back to the story. One Sunday morning, when the animals assembled to receive their orders, you notice how at first they were assembling to just have joy? And then they were assembling to have tradition?
Right?
And celebrate their heroes? Now they're assembled to receive their orders. But they're not offended yet. MAGA. Napoleon announced that he had decided upon a new policy. From now onwards, Animal Farm would engage in trade with the neighboring farms, not, of course, for any commercial purpose, but simply in order to obtain certain materials which were urgently necessary. Oil. Airplanes from Qatar. It's not quite the same, but the needs of the windmill must override everything else, he said. The windmill's sort of like a ballroom by now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
He was therefore making arrangements to sell a stack of hay and part of the current year's wheat crop, and later on, if money were needed, it would have to be made up by the sale of eggs, for which there was always a market in Willingdon. The hen said Napoleon should welcome this sacrifice as their own special contribution towards the building of the windmill. Why does that remind me of the Nazi women that were having babies for the Fuhrer, or all the pregnant women now in Trump's cabinet? That's... Once again, the animals were conscious of a vague uneasiness. Never to have any dealings with human beings, never to engage in trade, never to make use of money. Republicans, never to trade with Russia. Had not these been among the earliest resolutions passed at that first triumphant meeting after Jones was expelled? All the animals remembered passing such resolutions, or at least they thought that they remembered it. The 4 young pigs who had protested when Napoleon abolished the meetings raised their voices timidly. Sure, after Jimmy Kimmel and John Lemon and We Don't See Colbert, of course they're doing it timidly. But they were promptly silenced by a tremendous growling from the dogs. Then, as usual, the sheep broke into 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, and the momentary awkwardness was smoothed over. Ugh. Caroline Levitt, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. Finally, Napoleon raised his trotter for silence and announced that he had already made all the arrangements. He'd already made all the arrangements. There would be no need for any of the animals to come in contact with human beings, which would clearly be most undesirable. He intended to take the whole burden upon his own shoulders. A Mr. Whymper, Whymper, a solicitor living in Willingdon. A solicitor would be an attorney, right?
Yes.
Had agreed to act as an intermediary between Animal Farm and the outside world, and would visit the farm every Monday morning to receive his instructions. Napoleon ended his speech with the usual cry of, "Long live Animal Farm!" And after the singing of Beasts of England, the animals were dismissed. One England. So he'd already made the arrangements. He'd already contacted humans. No need to vote. No need for anyone else to think about anything whatsoever. He gets to break the rules, which means that there are new rules, because if the king does it, it must be right. Afterwards, Squealer made a round of the farm and set the animals' minds at rest. I'm sure he did. Squealer Levitt. He assured them that the resolution against engaging in trade and using money had never been passed or even suggested. It was pure imagination. So I was wrong. The 2 legs good, bad for whatever. 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. That's MAGA. That's the, what did you say? USA. That's
champ.
right. That's right. Whereas Squealer's obviously Levitt.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So here he is, assuring them that the resolution against engaging in trade and using money had never been passed or even suggested. And my friends, we have videotape of my reading it to you, so please feel free to go back to probably chapter 1 or chapter 2 and see if Squealer's telling you the truth. It was pure imagination, probably traceable in the beginning to lies circulated by Snowball. I guess Snowball's now Biden. Everything is Snowball's fault, right? We'll see if I'm right. A few animals still felt faintly doubtful, but Squealer asked them shrewdly, "Are you certain that this is not something that you have dreamed, comrades? Have you any record of such a resolution? Is it written down anywhere?" And since it was certainly true that nothing of the kind existed in writing, the animals were satisfied that they had been mistaken. Which is exactly why we have so much video that we can show of many people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Every Monday, Mr. Whymper visited the farm as had been arranged. He was a sly-looking little man with side whiskers, a solicitor in a very small way of business. He was a sly-looking little man with side whiskers, a solicitor in a very small way of business, but sharp enough to have realized earlier than anyone else that Animal Farm would need a broker and that the commissions would be worth having. How do they, I guess they're going to have to get money then to give him a commission unless they're going to give him windfall apples. I just don't,
right.
And milk. But I mean, it makes sense. It's just that it makes sense to me that there should have been discussions and voting and all that. It's more the sly way that they're doing it around the animals and keeping the animals dumb. The animals watched his coming and going with a kind of dread and avoided him as much as possible. And just because they made him distasteful, therefore, they don't get to know anything about people. Therefore, that gives Napoleon and the other pigs an awful lot of power.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Ignorance is not bliss.
No.
Forever. Nevertheless, the sight of Napoleon on all fours, delivering orders to Whymper, who stood on 2 legs, roused their pride and partly reconciled them to the new arrangement. But the idea of Trump as a pig on all fours being animal-like, giving orders to all the humans who are taking the orders is sort of apt. Their relations with, but that explains a lot of MAGA going, look at this guy, this pig man that we elected who's giving orders to all the elite. That is a part of it.
That's part of it.
Ew. That's not willful ignorance. That's not being stupid. That isn't necessarily exactly being racist. It's being ew and contemptible and feeling like you're Steve Bannon, but you get to rule the world. That's what it is. Ew. That's why Stephen Miller and Steve Bannon, that's why they like Trump, because Trump was able to do and be and say and have that because he's tall and he was sort of handsome and wealthy and enough accepted into the elite to be able to do this and turn all of this crassness and this mugginess onto the elite.
Yep.
I'm going to read that sentence again because I want to cap this so you get it. Nevertheless, the sight of Napoleon on all fours delivering orders to Whymper, who stood on 2 legs, roused their pride and partly reconciled them to the new arrangement. That's why they'd let him be a king. Their relations with the human race were now not quite the same as they had been before. The human beings did not hate Animal Farm any less now that it was prospering. Indeed, they hated it more than ever. Every human being held it as an article of faith that the farm would go bankrupt sooner or later, and above all, that the windmill would be a failure. They would meet in the public houses and prove to one another by means of diagrams that the windmill was bound to fall down, and that if it did stand up, that it would never work. And yet, against their will, they had developed a certain respect for the efficiency with which the animals were managing their own affairs. One symptom of this was that they had begun to call Animal Farm by its proper name and ceased to pretend that it was called the Manor Farm. They had also dropped their championship of Jones, who had given up hope of getting his farm back and gone to live in another part of the county. Except through Whipper, there was as yet no contact between Animal Farm and the outside world, but there were constant rumors that Napoleon was about to enter into a definite business agreement, either with Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood or of Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield, but never it was noticed with both of them simultaneously. Interestingly enough, he played that same thing in 1984 with the three Oceana, right, that they were all, two of them were always teamed up against one, but it was always changing.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it here too. And here we are at this point with NATO, with Russia, with Ukraine. And it just makes me wonder how much of this is part of diplomacy and part of what they do, either obviously or behind the scenes anyway.
Right.
Something. Now we're getting interesting. It was about this time that the pigs suddenly moved into the farmhouse and took up their residence there. Again, the animals seemed to remember that a resolution against this had been passed in the early days, and again Squealer was able to convince them that this was not the case. It was absolutely necessary, he said, that the pigs, who were the brains of the farm, should have a quiet place to work in. It was also more suited to the dignity of the leader, for of late he had taken to speaking of Napoleon under the title of leader. To live in a house than in a mere sty. Nevertheless, some of the animals were disturbed when they heard that the pigs not only took their meals in the kitchen and used the drawing room as a recreation room, but also slept in the beds. Boxer passed it off as usual with, Napoleon is always right. God works in mysterious ways.
Right. Right.
If the king does it, it must be right.
So much for the
MAGA. USA, USA. But Clover, who thought she remembered a definite ruling against beds, went to the end of the barn and tried to puzzle out the 7 commandments, which were inscribed there. Finding herself unable to read more than individual letters, she fetched Muriel. Muriel, she said, read me the 4th commandment. Does it not say something about never sleeping in a bed? With some difficulty, Muriel spelt it out. It says, no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets, she announced finally. Amendments. Curiously enough, Clover had not remembered that the 4th commandment mentioned sheets. But as it was there on the wall, it must have done so. That reminds me of his taking the Black history off the walls and thinking that must be that way. Right. Now we're going to have these uneducated people from getting educated with Prager University thinking those were never there. Those were the Democrats telling us that Biden put them up. Slavery didn't really happen, nor did the Holocaust. These people just want to play the victim card. Okay. And Squealer, who happened to be passing at this moment, attended by 2 or 3 dogs, was able to put the whole matter in its proper perspective. You have heard then, comrades, he said, that we pigs now sleep in the beds of the farmhouse. And why not? You did not suppose, surely, that there was ever a ruling against beds. A bed merely means a place to sleep in. A pile of straw in a stall is a bed, properly regarded. The rule was against sheets, which are a human invention. We've removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets. I guess you can have a blanket of straw, so therefore it's not a human invention, right?
Right.
Okay. It's cloth, but we're going to pretend that that's not true.
Right.
Okay. We have removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets. And very comfortable beds they are, too. But not more comfortable than they need, I can tell you, comrades, with all the brain work we have to do nowadays. You would not rob us of our repose, would you, comrades? You would not have us too tired to carry out our duties. Surely none of you wishes to see Jones back.
You know, to go back to the fear factor.
Have to. And hate.
Right?
The animals reassured him on this point immediately, and no more was said about the pigs sleeping in the farmhouse beds. And when some days afterwards it was announced that from now on the pigs would get up an hour later in the morning than the other animals, no complaint was made about that either. We wouldn't want to hear growling.
No.
Or have Jones come back.
Right?
By the autumn, the animals were tired but happy. They had had a hard year, and after the sale of part of the hay and corn, the stores of food for the winter were none too plentiful. But the windmill, heaven, the future, getting rid of Obamacare, getting rid of all the immigrants, whatever that is, the windmill, compensated for everything. It was almost half built now. Maybe it's the wall. After the harvest, there was a stretch of clear, dry weather, and the animals toiled harder than ever, thinking it was well worthwhile to plod to and fro all day with blocks of stone, if by doing so they could raise the walls another foot. Boxer would even come out at nights and work for an hour or two on his own by the light of the harvest moon. He's going to die.
Right?
Well, he's kind of wearing himself out.
Exactly.
In their spare moments, the animals would walk round and round the half-finished mill, admiring the strength and perpendicularity of its walls, and marveling that they should ever have been able to build anything so imposing. Only old Benjamin refused to grow enthusiastic about the windmill, though as usual he would utter nothing beyond the cryptic remark that donkeys live a long time. November came with raging southwest winds. Building had to stop because it was now too wet to mix the cement. Finally, there came a night when the gale was so violent that the farm buildings rocked on their foundations and several tiles were blown off the roof of the barn. The hens woke up squawking with terror because they'd all dreamed simultaneously of hearing a gun go off in the distance. I don't buy it. All the hens dreamed the same thing all at once. In the morning, the animals came out of their stalls to find that the flagstaff had been blown down and an elm tree at the foot of the orchard had been plucked up like a radish. They had just noticed this when a cry of despair broke from every animal's throat. A terrible sight met their eyes. The windmill was in ruins.
Youch.
With one accord, they dashed down to the spot. Napoleon, who seldom moved out of a walk, raced ahead of them all. Yes, there it lay, the fruit of all their struggles, leveled to its foundations. The stones they had broken and carried so laboriously scattered all around. Unable at first to speak, they stood gazing mournfully at the litter of fallen stone. Napoleon paced to and fro, in silence, occasionally snuffing at the ground. The punctuation was read that way because there was a period missing, just so you know. His tail had grown rigid and twitched sharply from side to side, a sign in him of intense mental activity. Well, that explains it. It's either his head's up his butt or he thinks with his asshole. Suddenly he halted as though her mind were quite made up. "Comrades," he said quietly, "do you know who is responsible for this? Do you know the enemy who has come in the night and overthrown our windmill? Snowball," he suddenly roared in a voice of thunder.
Oh.
"Snowball has done this thing. In sheer malignity, thinking to set back our plans and avenge himself for his ignominious expulsion, this traitor has crept here under cover of night and destroyed our work of nearly a year. Comrades, excuse me. So is it Biden, Obama, or Hillary Clinton?
I don't know.
Right now it might be Epstein, but... Comrades, here and now I pronounce the death sentence upon Snowball, animal hero second class, and half a bushel of apples to any animal who brings him to justice. A full bushel to anyone who captures him alive. The animals were shocked beyond measure to learn that even Snowball could be guilty of such an action. There was a cry of indignation, and everyone began thinking of ways of catching Snowball if he could ever come back. Maybe Snowball is, I don't know, immigrants who were let out of insane asylums. Almost immediately, the footprints of a pig were discovered in the grass at a little distance from the knoll. Yeah, Napoleon ran ahead.
Right.
Whatever. They could only be traced for a few yards, but appeared to lead to a hole in the hedge.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Napoleon snuffed deeply at them and pronounced them to be snowballs.
Probably squealers.
I'm just so disgusted.
Right.
Okay. He gave it as his opinion that Snowball had probably come from the direction of Foxwood Farms. I'm right. I was actually starting to think about what the ballots that they took from Fulton County, and how somebody's going to snuff at them and pat at them with a trotter and say that they were Venezuelan, or maybe they'll find coffee molecules, or I don't know.
Right.
And then they'll get Maduro to say, yeah, and Chavez set this up before he died or something.
Right.
Some version of something. Anyway, Napoleon snuffed deeply at them and pronounced them to be snowballs. He gave it as his opinion that Snowball had probably come from the direction of Foxwood Farm. No more delays, comrades, cried Napoleon when the footprints had been examined. There is work to be done. This very morning, we begin rebuilding the windmill, and we will build all through the winter, rain or shine. Oh, we will teach this miserable traitor that he cannot undo our work so easily. Remember, comrades, there must be no alteration in our plans. They shall be carried out to the day. Forward, comrades! Long live the windmill! Long live Animal Farm! What say you?
I say they're very far from their beginning commandments.
They are. They're being told what to do. They're being, well, either they're being lied to or they're being undermined.
Right?
It's not good.
It's not good.
So where's this going to go? They're going to work their... they don't have fingers, so I can't say that. They're going to work themselves to skin and bones.
Right. Okay.
Probably Napoleon will make them finish it. Why not?
Right. And he has his private army to
enforce the
work.
I wonder if he even hires people to come help.
Oh, interesting thought.
I don't remember that being in the book, but
right.
He already hired someone to help.
Exactly. Whimper.
That's pretty darn funny. Whimper. Okay. I just don't have anything more to say. I'm sort of feeling appalled and feeling like they would like us to be living in this sort of similar space, the powers that be at the moment. I think they want us to be this afraid and this fooled. And the fact that we're not is very upsetting. Very upsetting indeed. And one thing I don't recall happening in Animal Farm is anything like Minneapolis. But we'll see. Have a good Valentine's Day.